Welcome in. It is March 13th, Thursday, March 13th, 2025. Last one on the face of the planet. Spring practice is on and popping. We got more spring intel, man. How about that? You don't need to pinch yourself. You don't need to splash cold water in your face. Do that if you need to do that to get dialed in for the show. But we got actual cleats on the grass, intel flying across different message boards across the On3 network. It's a good time to be alive. Good time to talk college football. Good time to be subscribed right here to the On3 YouTube channel. So if you haven't already, go ahead and do that. Go ahead and get dialed in on the podcast feed as well. The Hard Count with JD Piquel, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. Again, no judgment. We're more of an Apple operation over here on this side of the desk myself. But regardless, tons to get into. We're going to get to spring intel in a second. But I want to start with this little preamble, if you will. We'll wax poetic for a second. Last time we told you, believe all the hype, drink all the Kool-Aid, all that good stuff. And that's nice to get yourself emotionally excited for spring football. I'm here to tell you, make yourself emotionally available for spring football. Like you can only fall in love when you're willing to get your heart broken. So during spring practice, go ahead and tell yourself all the sweet lies that you need to hear to get yourself totally invested in the next season. I don't care about, the spring practice reports that maybe you're hearing about the certain player you wish was playing better. It's okay. It's okay. I'm telling you, they're going to be great when the season hits. Hey, maybe a couple guys are injured. They'll be ready. Be willing to be emotionally available for your roster, for your coaching staff, regardless of what you're hearing right now with cleats on the grass during spring practice. So with that being said, let's jump into the intel. We're going to go all over the country today, but let's go to Miami, Coral Gables, the spring intel from Gary Furman and the folks over at Kane Sport, crushing all the coverage over there. Y'all, last year defense was very bad. Swiss cheese kind of defense from the folks over there in Coral Gables. They have since overhauled that staff. It's early, so we'll see what happens as we get further into this thing and when they actually start playing games. But the vibe is, with the new defensive coordinator and the multiple new defensive coaches over there, Corey Heatherman coming over from Minnesota to run the defense, they feel like overall they have better communication, always a good thing, and better depth on defense. Now, that depth has to be sustained. That communication has to carry over. But that's not a bad jumping off point during spring. Those are probably the two things that you would hope you're hearing at this point ahead of the season, a few practices in. On the defensive line, they feel especially good. They're really excited about Armando Blunt and what he's going to be for them come the fall. There's a lot of known commodities up front, but to have some of those young guys starting to come into their own. Listen, a Mario Cristobal football team, we said it since he took the job. Yes, he's going to go get top talent, but you can't change where you're from as a head coach, not geographically. And Mario Cristobal is from Miami. You can't change that either. But he's from the line of scrimmage, from the offensive line. You see what the offensive line is at Miami right now, but the defensive line, I would have to imagine, is just as important to him. So to see all that talent now starting to come into their own since he's gotten there, that some of the guys they got early on that are starting to play to the level of potential you would hope they would eventually get to, vibes are good. Vibes are very, very good on the defensive side, which is massively important because last year, we said they were bad. The difference with them being bad last year and the potential of them having a repeat of last season defensively, there's no Cam Ward safety net for you. Like, you hope the offense is still good, but there is no number one rolling in with the Superman cape able to just take over and will you to a victory. Now, Carson Beck is someone we'll talk about here a little bit later in the segment, but the bottom line is it's not fair to expect the Miami offense to have the same exact output as they did a season ago. All right, I don't think we're stretching the truth in how we say that. Now, offensively, I just mentioned the offensive line. They feel great about that. They feel great about the running back room. They think they're 2, maybe 3 deep in that room. And it's funny because you think about Shannon Dawson, and we've said this multiple times, he has the air raid background. So, of course, they want to push the ball downfield. They were top 5 last year in the country when it came to yards per pass, score a lot of points. But even with that being said, they still want to punch you in the face on the ground. They still have a lot of power run concepts up front that they are going to, I think, probably lean on a little bit more than they did a season ago. I said it previously as well. Like, I think with Cam Ward and how good he was off script last year, you maybe didn't get a totally accurate flavor as to the structure of Shannon Dawson's offense. It's going to be a lot more structured in 2025. Like, the comparison I've made before is in 2024, it was the Cam Ward jazz. You kind of moving and grooving to the different rhythm of what's required in that certain moment. Maybe he's breaking contained, eyes downfield, throw back across his body, kind of just rolling with the punches. In 2025 with Carson Beck in this run game, I think it'll be a lot more of a symphony. Everyone playing their parts, coming in at the right time. And it sounds like, with that being the case, they have the pieces in the run game, line of scrimmage play, running back room, to be able to hold up their end of the bargain in the string section of that symphony. Now, the other part of the symphony, as we mentioned with Shannon Dawson, they're going to want to push the ball downfield. You lose your top 3 guys in Xavier Restrepo, Jacoby George. Isaiah Horton has transferred to Alabama. They're excited about him over there. So who steps up for them in the receiver room? What I'm being told is they're probably going to go to the portal to just get one more proven guy should he become available. But they think JoJo Trader, going to be a sophomore for them this year, is taking the proper steps to be a dude for them and step up in a big way. And then Malachi Toney is a true freshman, early enrollee. He's going to play. To what degree, we'll see, but they fully believe he is going to play. They're very excited about him to this point in time. Always good when you hear good things about early enrollees this early into practice. Like, if you're a true freshman and you just got to campus, it might take a second to figure out where your classes are and your way around Coral Gables, much less figure out a college offense and how to play college football at the highest level. To hear that already he's a name they're excited about, don't look past that. Do not look past that. I'll say this, too, about Malachi Toney. He is, from what I can gather, wired exactly how I want my young wide receiver to be wired. My first introduction to Malachi Toney was watching him during, I believe it was ESPNU or ESPN, during some of those earlier broadcasts when high school football gets rolling, and ESPN does a great job spotlighting those games. Malachi Toney catches a touchdown during his first half of a game maybe, and they do a sideline interview with my guy. I asked him about the play, and he tells the reporter on national television, I told the quarterback, check fade. This dude's not messing with me. Touchdown. I think Malachi Toney was an underclassman at that point too. So the confidence, the swagger, all those things, can't have too much of that at the wide receiver position, especially at a place like Miami. Malachi Toney projecting to be a dude for them in 2025 as a true freshman. Now here's the intel that everyone's curious about, and it's the intel without much intel to it, which is sort of a lame way to put it, but Carson Beck is going to start for you in 2025. We all understand that. You're paying him a lot of money. You brought him over to Georgia, or from Georgia instead of the NFL draft. He's going to be the guy. Getting a lot of mental reps, which I think the staff feels really confident in his progress and his ability to take those mental reps and translate that into fall camp and not miss too much of a beat. Your belief around Carson Beck and spring football, to me, is kind of a similar probably stance that some of y'all take on tipping when you're at a restaurant. Some of y'all think it's the most important thing in the world. Some of y'all think that it doesn't matter at all and it's a ridiculous thought to begin with. The bottom line here is that's what's happening with Carson Beck. So whether you believe in that for him or whether you think that it's not going to matter at all, he's getting mental reps. And the thought is they're going to try to involve him as much as possible during the practice. So it's not going to be a thing where Carson Beck's just on the headset every practice and watching 11 on 11. They want to actually have him within those drills, within those team settings, not actually throwing the football, but actually taking physical, having physical repetitions, if you will, in addition to the mental side of things. Now, the thing that I'm most intrigued about when we talk about the intel around Carson Beck, it's hard to not compare him getting to Miami to where Cam Ward was a season ago when he transferred in from Washington State, because there's kind of a similar expectation for both. This is a dude who's going to allow us to execute the Shannon Dawson offense, score a lot of points, go win the ACC. Now, Cam Ward held up his end of the bargain last year, but we told you the defense didn't do their thing. So here we are. But one thing we kept hearing about Cam Ward this time last year, in addition to all the physical stuff that he was bringing to the table and the way the ball jumped out of his arm, all those things, it was this dude is an alpha. This is his locker room. This is his team, all those things. Now, for Carson Beck, it's a little bit harder for him to be able to do that when you're not actually out there fully practicing with your guys. So what I have been told from the folks close to Miami, he's putting in the work. So I'm not worried we're not hearing the exact same thing about Cam Ward, the alpha that he was, and Carson Beck acclimating right now. Oh, stiff arm right there. I'm not worried about that just yet. I'm not worried about it at all, actually, just because of what I told you, but he's putting in the work. If you are into the Bo Callahan psychology of this whole thing, for those of y'all that have seen Draft Day, Carson Beck invited some folks over, or invited, from what I can gather, the majority, if not all the team, I think, over to his house for a Super Bowl watch party. Good move, good QB1 move, building the chemistry. He's putting in the work. So it's going to take some time, as these things do, but all in all, good reports from the folks out there at Kane Sport and good vibes so far. A few practices in at Miami. I fully expect them to be right back in the mix for an ACC title in year 4 under Mario Cristobal. And I think Carson Beck will eventually, when they get to fall camp, be in good shape to run the offense. So let's stay in the Sunshine State, shall we? Florida Spring Intel. Zach Albalverdi and the team just crushing it over there at Gators Online. I'm always really curious with the situation that a school like Florida is in to hear about the vibes around the program, because the way they finished the year was really intriguing because they finished so strong, but before that it was, is Billy Napier even going to be the guy? There was a lot there with Florida. And right now the feeling at Florida is last year was nice, but forget all the conversation around our schedule. Like, we think we have a roster now where, yes, we have a tough schedule, but like, y'all are going to have to deal with us too. Like, you're going to have to walk out there on a Saturday and see our roster. Because when Billy Napier got there, Florida, from what I've heard from people close to that program, they were operating at a bit of a deficit. Now, I don't know if Florida now is operating at a lead within the SEC from a talent perspective, but they're definitely not at a deficit. They're in a good spot now. Now, they're dealing with a lot of injuries, most notably DJ Lagway, being really careful with him this spring, not really throwing the football as of right now. Shoulder dinged up, lower body dinged up. And this is a huge bummer for spring practice. I mean, anytime you don't have your starting quarterback, it's tough, but it's extra disappointing if you're a Florida fan because you're keeping your ear close to the ground over on the Florida On3 message boards, Gator Online, and you're wanting to hear about how the offense is ramping up because there's so much around him on this offense to get excited about. 4 of the 5 starters back on the offensive line. The running back room, you know what that's going to be. The most interesting piece of intel that I've heard so far out of Florida spring practice is they feel really good about their wide receiver room. So good, in fact, that what I have been told is they don't think they're probably going to go to the transfer portal post-spring practice to go get another weapon, which before putting my ear close to the ground on spring practice, I would have thought the exact opposite. I would have thought they would try to go add another proven commodity. Very sneaky portal addition for them was a one J. Michael Sturdivant, big body wide receiver from UCLA, basically was a top 100 transfer portal guy when he jumped in there. Worth noting, Florida beat out Georgia to land his services. This is a dude who's right around 6'3". It's now bulked up to 218. And when you track the practice miles per hour these guys are putting in, clocked in at 23 miles per hour. So if you believe in the practice reports, which we do on this show, even if he's not touching that during a game, to have that in the tank for a dude that size, that's filthy. That's absolutely filthy. On top of that, they feel like they hit with all 3 of these true freshman receivers. They think all 3 of them are going to play. Dallas Wilson was the guy that they essentially flipped from Oregon. I've been told he does not look like a true freshman at all. Big body, I want to say he's right around 6'2", 6'3", 205 pounds-ish. Vernell Brown was bulked up to 180. He's going to be a beast for them in the slot. And then Nashawn Montgomery has been a tremendous, surprise for the Florida fan base in some sense with the noise that he's making so far throughout spring practice. What I've been told is when all 3 of those cats are on the field, the entire building stops and watches. When they're all in the game together, and they're not probably all going to start, but they'll all have a certain role. When they're all in there, they demand the attention of the practice field. Good things to hear right now so far through a few practices. Now, you take all those guys I just mentioned, and you add on to that you have Eugene Wilson, who's just rolling through right now in a non-contact jersey. Interesting note on him, he is going to be playing in the slot this year. Now, the reason why it's important, last year he was playing more of that Z position for them, which is more of an outside receiver, which is great. And Eugene Wilson ate greedy all year long. There's nothing negative to say about him. But with how twitchy he is and how much of a problem he can be from a matchup perspective with a nickel or a safety or a linebacker, I think he's going to have a huge season in 2025. I truly do. He's also beefed up a little bit to maybe protect himself and stay a little bit more healthy. So Eugene Wilson, probably going to be the go-to guy for you, paired with the Sturdivant, paired with those 3 freshmen. Don't look now. Billy Napier, man, he's very quietly, I think, been one of the best evaluators in the SEC, whether it's the transfer portal, whether it's the high school level. They've had some hits now, like Shamir Dike, Elijah Badger, both transfer receivers a season ago that got to Florida. Shamir Dike just tore up the NFL Combine not but a few weeks ago. That was a guy that came over from Wisconsin without a ton of fanfare. So just because you haven't heard of J. Michael Sturdivant all that much before this season, they feel great about him, feel great about these freshman additions, and then you pair with that the proven commodity that is a Eugene Wilson, and they feel like they're in a good spot right now when it comes to the wide receiver room. Now defensively, Cormani McClain has had a breakout offseason. We'll see what that looks like for him when he gets to the fall in terms of his role, getting some more burn because of injuries, but he's added 20 pounds since he got to Florida, and this is most important, he's bought in to what he needs to do to be successful at Florida. He gets to Florida, not on scholarship. He now is on scholarship, and he's been a guy that they've been very impressed with so far with in terms of how he's now carrying out his business, which wasn't always the case when he first got there. Late to meetings, not handling what he's supposed to do, and now Cormani McClain sounds like is doing a lot of those things. Jaden Woods is a freshman edge that is making the most buzz this spring. Not going to start, it sounds like, for Florida at this point in time, but he's definitely going to play kind of that jack position, which is essentially outside linebacker edge position for the Gators. There's a honor that Florida gives out to their guys during winter workouts. It's called the black jersey. And essentially all that is hey, you are operating and preparing and working out at the standard that we hold ourselves to here at Florida. And the two freshmen that were the first to get those black jerseys were a Jaden Woods, who I mentioned, and then also a Vernell Brown, who we've also mentioned. So they feel good about where they're at right now when it comes to how they have attacked the high school level of recruiting and what they've gotten so far through spring practice from those guys. So, yeah, some injuries. You're not thrilled about that, but Florida's not worried about it. Florida feels like they're in a really good spot here to make some noise in 2025 and pick up where they left off. Would you love if DJ Lagway was able to be full go right now? Of course, but even with that not being the case just yet, they are really encouraged with all they've seen so far during spring. And you should be, man. It's spring practice. Gosh dang it. Can't get fired up for spring practice. We can't help you. We can't help you. We won't help you if you can't get fired up for spring practice. One more school I want to touch on here. We'll stay in the SEC. What's the spring intel out of LSU? You're going into year 4 now of the Brian Kelly experience. What I've been told from people close to LSU, being dialed in over at the Bengal Tiger, LSU's on 3 site, they feel like this is the best situation this team has been in overall under Brian Kelly. They feel like they have the most talented roster, top to bottom, they've had. They also feel like they have the best staff they've had since they've gotten there. Now, quick disclaimer here. Obviously, when Jaden Daniels was there and you had 2 first-round picks on the perimeter, that's going to make a pretty strong case for the best offense that LSU's had. But remember, the defense was horrific. I mean, it was don't let your kids watch this thing. It's so inappropriate. Don't watch the defense. So now they feel like they're much better on that side. Feel like they bring back, obviously, a tremendous asset in Garrett Nussmeier at quarterback. But the story of the spring is going to be how these 16 transfers they've brought in are able to translate to immediate success. Because depth has been an issue for LSU over the course of the last few seasons under Brian Kelly. They went to work and made sure that wasn't going to be the case. In fact, before we got on the air here, our very own Pete Nakos here at On 3 reported that LSU's NIL budget has doubled in recent months, north of $18 million. That'll help. That'll help make sure you got the depth that you need. So they feel really good about the transfer portal class they grabbed. A name that you hear right away when you ask folks in Baton Rouge about the portal class is edge Patrick Payton coming over from Florida State. This is a guy they're excited about because of the explosivity and what he can bring off the edge. And, man, if he can just be a version of what he was at Florida State, he can just be close to that. Like, LSU is going to be a problem because you got Whit Weeks not playing this spring, Harold Perkins not playing this spring, but you add those guys back into the fold with a version of Patrick Payton from 2023 under at Florida State. Like, they're going to be in good shape here. Now, I mentioned Harold Perkins. Again, no intel for him when it comes to spring practice right now, still getting right, but they're going to have him play the star position. Star position essentially for him is going to be like the outside linebacker role. Have to believe a lot of that will be him rushing the passer off the edge. Harold Perkins on one side, Patrick Payton on the other. That's going to be nasty. That's going to be very, very nasty. The thought around Harold Perkins previously was, well, hey, how does he fit in the LSU defense and also make sure he sets himself up for success when it comes time to be drafted into the NFL? The reports from NFL people essentially is, dude, just go do what you did your freshman year. Just go get after the passer, Make some plays in coverage when they ask you to, but like go do that again and put that on tape. You're going to be in good shape. And that's, I think, what LSU fans have been begging for since, the last couple of seasons, since the Arkansas game, really. And Harold Perkins is going to be, I believe, yet again, a force for LSU in 2025. Now, some young bucks going to get some shine here for LSU, making some noise during spring practice. The number one running back in America, Harlem Berry, he's going to have a role this year. The way LSU operates, they play 3, maybe 4 running backs. What I've been told is Harlem Berry is currently the second best running back behind Caden Durham. He'll get some burn. DJ Pickett was our number 1 corner in all of the 2025 class. He's already on campus, and he could end up starting for LSU, depending on how things go here throughout spring practice. So they feel really good about those young bucks, feel really good about the portal class. And overall, man, they're very, very excited about, again, the combo of the roster plus the staff. Let's go back to the staff for a second. No Mike Denbrock, so of course that's, he's one of the best OCs in college football. But the combo of what they have, Joe Sloan on offense, going into his second season, some continuity, paired with Blake Baker going into his second season with that defensive staff, all of that, again, paired with the fact that you have some major Louisiana ties across the board here with position coaches and coordinators, all that alike. The reason why I think that's important, I think you got to get the LSU job to a certain degree. Whether I say get the job in terms of understanding the job. Like that was almost the knock on Brian Kelly when he got there was, well, it's not a fit. Well, he kind of faking the Southern accent. Well, he's not from around here. And while I think that's overrated, because I think if you win games, you're a fit, but I do think to have your staff be embedded and aligned with what Louisiana is, I think that plays a massive factor when it comes to being able to communicate well with your roster. I think it plays a massive factor when it comes to recruiting at a high level within the state, which is what Brian Kelly has said multiple times has got to be the point of emphasis for LSU. So overall, this is the year now for LSU. What I've been told is their focus is we got to go make the college football playoff. It's expanded to 12. We got a roster to do it. Bring a quarterback back now who threw for 4,000 yards a season ago. Let's go get it. Let's go get it. Now, it's very early on in spring practice, but if you were curious about Garrett Nussmeier and how he's progressing, they feel really good about the fact that he's going into his second year as a starter. We said it on our show, man. Like the fact that you are now walking into the Alabama game, for example, where last year that was essentially a playoff game for you, and there was probably some acclamation for you emotionally. Just guesstimating here, that's not going to be the case this year. So it's Garrett Nussmeier's offense. I've been told it's Whit Weeks' defense. So there's no question as to the leadership or who's in charge of those things when it comes to the way LSU's trending right now during spring practice. So all that's to say, they feel great about the portal. They feel great about the roster. And one more thing I'll add here, they really love what they have, speaking of the roster, in their receiver room, along with a Trey Green who came on strong at the end of last season. You got Barry and Brown via the portal, Nick Anderson via the portal. You bring back Aaron Anderson. Like they are in really good shape here to maximize what you have with Garrett Nussmeier. So vibes are where they should be in Baton Rouge. They're in a good spot, and the goal is very, very clear for them, which is make the college football playoff. And I think if you asked any Tiger fan, it is let's go win the whole darn thing, which, I mean, when you're LSU, you should expect to. So spring football is here. So is spring optimism, expectations. We're here for all of it, and we're putting ourselves out there this spring, man. We're ready to fall in love, ready to get hurt, and that's what spring is all about. Hey, thanks for everyone dialed in. Cato on the ones and twos. We're having a good time over here. Make sure you are subscribed if you haven't already. It's college football, nothing but, so thanks for being a part of this, man. We got spring football on deck. That's phenomenal, but let's take a quick look at the 2025 season. What's going to happen in the fall here? And as we're getting ready for this show, I thought now would be an appropriate time for us to impact some of the most pivotal games of the 2025 season. Let's start here with week 1, man. You got Notre Dame going to Miami. Say, JD, week 1? An expanded playoff? That's the most pivotal game. It's one of the most pivotal games. I think it is because of the way that both of these schedules are lined up and because of what's in front of both these teams. Like Notre Dame, if you want to make the college football playoff, you probably have to be 11-1. 10-2 with no conference title game. I think you're playing with fire there a little bit. But the college football playoff run for Notre Dame really could be all but set up if you just handle business that first week against Miami. Like you could maybe drop the game to Texas A&M, depending on how you feel about USC. You're going to be in good shape. Now, I love Purdue, but like Drew Brees left a long time ago. They're not going to give Notre Dame any kind of issues here. Rondale Moore is not trotting out of the tunnel there for the Boilermakers. So for Notre Dame, it's probably a 3-game season, but I really think that if they can beat Miami, you feel real good about those next two that I think we're probably all circling with A&M and USC, and that's going to set the table for them. It's going to be a table setter for the folks out there in South Bend with the game they have in Hard Rock there. Now for Miami, they went 10-2 last year, missed the college football playoff. Why? Well, you go back to their resume, and there wasn't enough juice there. And it's not really Miami's fault, but there wasn't anything there where you could stand on the table for Miami and say, well, hey, this win is why we should be in. And the Florida win probably aged, as well as it could have, but there was nothing there that got you super excited for putting Miami into that 12-team playoff. If you can beat Notre Dame in this first game, you have your resume builder. You have some insurance now, even if you don't win the ACC. If you get to 10-2 and you have a win over Notre Dame, you have a little bit of extra level of confidence that when Reese Davis is reading off who's making the college football playoff on Selection Sunday, okay, hey, well, we got that win in the back pocket. We have a team that played for a national title a season ago in Notre Dame, and spoiler, I think Notre Dame is probably going to be in that conversation for the playoff yet again in 2025. That's going to, I think, really bolster their resume a little bit. So that's crucial for Miami. I know it's early. I know there's a lot on the table for both these teams after this game, but to be able to get a win that first week and have that resume boosted and already in the back pocket, that would be huge for Cristobal and company. So the determining factor for me in this matchup really goes back to the new playmakers for Miami. We talked about spring practice a little bit for them. A lot of unknowns in that room. A lot of unknowns. Now, a lot of confidence, but a lot of unproven production. They're going to depend on probably having to go get one more guy via the portal, as we already told you. So the thing that this comes down to me, I think it's about, can Miami's wide receivers separate against Notre Dame's man coverage? Because, yes, they changed defensive coordinators. I get all that in South Bend, but the game plan is going to be the same. It is play man on the outside, be downhill in the box, let's get after it. Because if you can't separate against that Notre Dame defense that was one of the most aggressive in the country last year, they're bringing the crib, dude. Bringing the absolute crib against a quarterback now that was making his first start in a new offense that didn't get spring practice. But if they can separate and they do start scoring some points and they look maybe just even a little bit like the Cam Ward offense from a year ago in terms of how many points they're scoring, then you force Notre Dame with their first-year starting quarterback, whether it's C.J. Carr, whether it's Steve Angeli, Kenny Minchie, whoever it is, you force them to have to go score for score on the road with a veteran quarterback, and I think one of the best coordinators in college football in Shannon Dawson. I don't love that. I don't love that, especially with the hope that Miami is better on defense if you're a Hurricane fan. So that's going to be huge from a table-setting perspective for both those teams. Week one, not a playoff game, but playoff implications, I think, for both sides. Now, let's stay in week one here. Texas at Ohio State. Now, I have both these teams in my college football playoff. Hear me clearly. I don't think this is same deal. I don't think this is a make or break kind of game. But the reason why it's so pivotal is more so a momentum thing where both schools are at right now. Both schools playing a first-year starting quarterback. Now, my first day of varsity football in high school, I got a nasty blister, dude. Like, it was like darn near through 3 layers of my skin. It was gross. And so the entire fall camp, I'm practicing every single day on this nasty blister. It's not getting better. I'm trying to find a way to win this position battle where I can't even run full speed. Kind of a similar vibe for whoever loses this game. It doesn't mean that you can't still go make the playoff and win your conference and all those things. It's not a conference loss if you lose it. But if you're Texas, you lose your first game of the season, and you still got to go to Florida, just casually go to the swamp. Oklahoma, neutral site. It's a frisky one with one John Mateer playing quarterback for them. Like, who knows what happens there? At Georgia, Texas A&M. Like, there's a lot there where you lose one of your potentially 2 losses you can have to still make the college football playoff. Don't love that. Again, I still think they're able to make the playoff even if they lose this game, but I would much rather get a win for Arch Manning on the road in a hostile Columbus, Ohio, boost the confidence. Now we go. Okay, now we go. That'd be the vibe I'd love to leave with if I'm Texas. Kind of same deal for Ohio State. You drop the game to Texas, you have this weird stretch where you're at Illinois, who's going to be a top 15 team, and then you turn around and you stay on the road and play at Wisconsin. You're saying, JD, Wisconsin? Just ask Oregon. Not an easy out, especially when you go to Madison. You also still play Penn State, who's got the get or done or die trying vibe to them. and then you go to Michigan. And it's not going to be easier than it was a season ago where you were a 20-plus point favorite and you had the Monstars as a roster. So all that's to say now, again, I think overall, same thing we said for Texas can be true for Ohio State. Whether it's Julian Sayin, I think it will be, Lincoln Keenholz, just get some confidence for this team. Beat a team that you beat a year ago in the semifinals to go to the national championship game and going to be one of the best rosters in college football in Texas. To be able to give yourself that momentum and not have to do the self-talk after week one and say, hey, we're good, don't worry, first-year starting quarterback. Just forget all that. Just start out with a win, and we'll be off and running. It's more so a momentum and psychological thing to me for both sides than it would be for a actual wins and losses standings perspective, in my humble opinion. Now, let's go to week 5. Oregon at Penn State, I think, is one of the most pivotal games of the 2025 season. This is crucial for Oregon because of the potential to have a tiebreaker with Ohio State when it comes to the Big Ten title game, because they will also play Penn State, the Buckeyes. Here's my question for Oregon. Are you really going to put yourself into fight or flight mode before you even get to October? Like, is that really the world you're going to find yourself in if you're Dan Lanning and the Ducks? Because I think it's also worth noting now, this is a spot where you can make up some ground optically when it comes to Oregon and the whole college football playoff committee saying, let's say that they don't make the Big Ten championship. Now, are we predicting that right now? Not necessarily, but let's just say Oregon doesn't make the Big Ten title game. If they can get a win over Penn State at Penn State, you don't think that carries some weight with the committee? You don't think that maybe is going to juice them up a little bit on Selection Sunday? So to me, it's more of an insurance thing. Like, I do think Oregon can drop this game and still find their way into the college football playoff, but I don't love the optics of it. And I wouldn't feel enormously confident if that ends up happening for the Ducks that early on in the season. Now, the Penn State side of this is, I think, actually even more impactful. Can we just be adults about this? Like, 10-2 for Penn State would be a bad season internally. Not saying they don't still make the playoff, because pretty soon everyone's going to make the playoff, it feels like. But with all that you brought back, Drew Aller, brought back both running backs, went out and got one of the best defensive coordinators in the sport in Jim Knowles, who's got a national title ring on his finger. If you go 10-2, with one of those losses being to Oregon and the other being to Ohio State, it'd be so discouraging. Not because you won't still make the playoff. I think you would. Probably not as a home playoff team, but it almost feel like a mental block kind of thing, wouldn't it? Because if you lose to Oregon at home, and you would hope that there's whiteout conditions for this one, you really going to go play in Columbus and beat Ohio State? You think you have a better chance of doing that? I have a harder time getting on board with that. So, again, it's not a season sinker for either one, but especially for Penn State, if you want to knock off the narrative of 10-win James Franklin and can't win the big one James Franklin, go get it done at home early on in the year. Set the table for a massive one against Ohio State a little bit later in the year. The key to me in this one is really going to be about, did Penn State do what they needed to do on the perimeter and go get some skill players, man? Did they go get some guys that can actually go make a difference for you on the outside and allow you to score with an Oregon, score with an Ohio State in the future? I think this is a game that will be a really good temp setter for us. We'll have a real good gauge as to, does Penn State have national title chops from this game? Because if they can score with Oregon, there's no more questions, Your Honor, about Penn State. Like, we feel good about the direction they're headed and what they can accomplish. But if it's another game where they can't separate and there's no juice offensively and we win a rock fight, you don't have any bad losses, you don't have anything that's considered a bad win in college football, especially if it's against Oregon. But it would leave me feeling very empty if I'm a Penn State fan and we can't score enough to go win a football game of that caliber. Last one to touch on here. Week 9, one of the most impactful, most pivotal games of the college football season in the SEC. Not Bama, LSU, not Georgia, Texas. Those are pivotal in their own right. Alabama at South Carolina. What did we learn last year assessing the college football playoff? The SEC bubble is extremely delicate. We had 3 teams on the bubble last year: South Carolina, Alabama, Ole Miss. I don't want to be overly dramatic, but this could be a playoff game. October 25th could be a playoff game for both sides. South Carolina could be anywhere from 0 to 2 losses coming in my humble opinion. But if you're going to take the next step that Shane Beamer and I think that team expect to take, which is competing for college football playoff bids and all those things, You got to win games like this. When you have one of the premier brands in the sport, still one of the best head coaches in the sport, one of the best rosters in the sport, in Alabama rolling into your place in October, you got to go get it done, man. You absolutely have to get it done because you're at LSU, you have Oklahoma before this game, then after this game, you go to Ole Miss, and then you also, just for good measure, have games at A&M and Clemson to finish. So I understand now the Clemson game isn't going to be part of the whole discussion for the SEC, but don't leave it up to a spot like last year where you're playing Clemson in the Palmetto Bowl and you're like, okay, can we boost the resume enough to get in? Don't have that conversation. Just feel good enough that last game of the season because you took care of business against Alabama to go get in the college football playoff, that the Clemson game is going to be either for seeding or it's going to be a game before the SEC title game. Just whatever it is, handle business. And handling business to me looks a lot like checking this box. Now, kind of the same thing for Alabama. They're at Georgia, got Vanderbilt, which we now have to consider, with Diego Pavia still there, playing his 19th year of college football. God bless him. At Missouri, Tennessee, and then you have this game, and then you also have LSU and Oklahoma afterwards, and of course you finish with the Iron Bowl. This is one of those when you count up as an Alabama fan the math it would take to get to 10 wins, which we're assuming in the SEC is going to be good enough to get you into the college football playoff. If you're counting up to 10 wins, this is one of those that you probably circle as a win for Bama. If you're a Crimson Tide fan, one of those gotta-have-it games. Because like at Georgia, we'll see, a little bit tricky. LSU, again, we'll see. Auburn, you never know, especially with it being at Auburn. Like there's so much there for Alabama where I don't think you can afford to have a game to South Carolina that doesn't break your way and still feel like you have a great chance to make the college football playoff. The thing to me that's interesting about this game, how often do we talk about the traits of a Nick Saban coached football team in Tuscaloosa and how they would walk in, kick the door down, didn't matter what day of the week it was, and they would take over your whole situation. Didn't matter if it was, the most hostile environment in college football, whether it was neutral site. Like the Nick Saban traits of his team was, we don't care about the elements, we don't care about the external. We're the same team every time. For Kalen DeBoer and this football team, with the ramp up they have to this game that I just told you about, Georgia, Missouri, Tennessee, for them to be able to go to Williams-Brice and get a win over that quarterback and the team with that much momentum in South Carolina, I think there's a chance for us to see the Kalen DeBoer traits. And y'all, I'll be real, we saw the Kalen DeBoer traits when he was at Washington. That team was living on the edge every single week. I mean, I can't even remember how many one-score games they won. It felt like the majority, though, during that national title berth season at Washington. I think they're capable of it, but I want to see it in this game. Because if you're going to elevate Alabama back to where they've been, if you're Kalen DeBoer, again, one of those got-to-have-it spots, if you will. Now, the decider for this game for me is all about Lenore Sellers. Is he Clark Kent or is he Superman? What can Ken Womack do here? Because the roster talent probably still favors Alabama. As well as South Carolina has trended, and as much as they're doing to try and get to that same tier of talent level, it's still going to require Lenore Sellers to make up the difference. Now, I think he's more than good enough to do that. We've seen it time and time again from him, but is he able to in this spot with that spotlight and with Kane Womack now in his second year as the defensive coordinator? More continuity. I think there's a lot more confidence this year during the spring practice period around that defense, and a lot less inexperience, too, for Alabama on that side of the football. I'll pair with that, whoever the new quarterback is for Alabama, can they handle what Williams-Brice is? Because we've seen a lot of good quarterbacks walk into that environment and fall apart. Whoever gets the keys to this Bama offense, whether it's a true freshman in Keelan Russell or a first-year starter in Austin Mack or Ty Simpson, it'll be new. It'll be some acclimation, some adjustments. So all that's to say, that to me will have a massive say, not just on the SEC race, but the college football playoff race as a whole. Appreciate y'all being dialed in, man. We'll keep this party rolling right now. We'll talk a little literature right now for you. One of my favorite books, for those of y'all that didn't know I could read, I am in fact literate. One of my favorite books is The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. And the premise of the book is essentially taking your obstacles, dealing with them, and turning those obstacles into the reason as to why you are successful. And so we get the most difficult schedule in the country rankings from ESPN's Bill Connolly, I believe it was last week. And to nobody's surprise, you see Florida and Oklahoma just hanging out in the top two there. Two toughest schedules, and it makes all the sense in the world. I mean, when you look at what they have, man, they both, as of right now, have on the preseason docket 7 ranked opponents. Both have stupid non-conference challenges. Florida goes to Miami and Oklahoma hosts Michigan. And then just for good measure for Florida, 4 of those ranked opponents they play on the road. Best of luck. Here we go, man. The thing that I think is interesting about both these teams, though, they're both in the top 20 when it comes to returning production on their rosters. Okay, so they got a lot of grown men playing football with IDs that work. They also have quarterbacks for both these sides that they feel enormously confident in. Like if you were to do a confidence ranking from a fan-based level for the SEC, I think LSU might be probably up there, but Oklahoma feels amazing about John Mateer. Same thing with Florida and DJ Lagway. And so if you feel great about the most important position in football and you feel good about what you have coming back, you don't worry about the schedule. You worry about, you playing to your potential every single game and being able to make it happen. So here's why I think the obstacle is the way is applicable here to both these sides. If you don't win your non-conference games, whatever. Like if you drop a game to Miami or you drop your game to Michigan if you're Oklahoma, whatever. Go get it, go win the SEC, and let's go make something happen. But if you win, I know it's a pain right now to see that logo on your schedule, but if you win, you have a chance to have a massive narrative shaper with you into that Selection Sunday or into those college football playoff rankings reveal shows. There's still people in that room now making decisions. There's still people watching college football games. Even if their watch party sucks, they're still watching the games. And so for the committee, I think to be able to look at Florida and say, oh, wait, they beat Miami, that matters to us. Michigan, that matters to us. How many times do we talk about Georgia and their win over Clemson throughout the course of this season? How many times do we talk about Texas and their win over Michigan early on in the year? That stuff matters. So while it's not ideal to see right now, I think that does ultimately matter for both these sides as it pertains to their desire to go compete for a national title and play in the college football playoff, more I guess, practically speaking. So that's the non-conference side. But let's take it to this level here. I think the same conversation can be said for the schedule as a whole. Mentioned the ranked opponents, all those things. If you go 9-3 with one of those schedules, it's my humble opinion that you should be graded on a curve. Now, hear me clearly. I am not saying that the game shouldn't matter because that's kind of been the go-to phrase people like to use. Just don't worry about the games as long as as long as it's the right record, that's whatever. Like I'm not saying the games don't matter. I'm saying how you look in your games and who you play should matter. And we're saying it right now. These games they're playing, the gauntlet they have is harder than everyone else in college football. That's not me saying that. That's what's being said for us. So if that's the case, and you go 9-3, and things shake your way with the other chaos across college football, I think one of those teams gets in. Again, the massive preface there is we got to have some chaos to go with it. But I do think that either Florida or Oklahoma, should they have the right-looking 9-3, and there's no egregious blowout loss on the resume, I think one of those teams would find their way in. Now, here's one more thing I'll say. We talk about the committee. We dunk on the committee a lot, and y'all committee, I mean, you know what you signed up for when you took that job. But I wonder a little bit if the psychology has any shift from what last year was watching that first round to what this year could be when you watch the first round. Because we saw a lot of teams now trot out there that I told you I think the logic was sound for them to get in the college football playoff, and they had good-looking records, but didn't have a good-looking margin of loss on the scoreboard, like seeing SMU lose to Penn State. I'm not saying that SMU shouldn't have been in. It's not what I'm saying, but I am saying you wonder a little bit, hey, could South Carolina have done something there? Hey, could Ole Miss have done something there? Not saying I've supported it, but I am saying when you talk about how the conversation could shift to 2025, I don't think that's irresponsible to wonder if the committee is maybe going to adapt a little bit with 1 year of data on the college football playoff and those first round games. Not predicting it, I'm just saying, you got a Squid Games kind of schedule for both these operations, and I think that overall, with the right amount of chaos and with the way that we should grade them on a curve, I think both have a very realistic case to make the college football playoff at 9-3. So not ideal right now to have this discussion if you're either side when you look at the schedule, but I do think that overall the obstacle for these teams could kind of in a bizarre way be the advantage when you look to 2025 and how that all could shape up. Let's finish with this. Recruiting does not stop The On3 Recruits channel is right in line with that. They talk recruiting year-round. Josh Newberg, Steve Wiltfong, Chad Simmons, just all the coverage you could need, so go check it out over there. But also subscribe here because we talk our fair share of recruiting as well on this show. And when it comes to recruiting, Clemson has been on a heater. We talk about them. We've already talked about them, so make sure you're dialed into the channel. We already have a video out on that. But USC, y'all, you go check the team rankings for the number one class in 2026. Currently USC. Currently the Trojans, man. And I know that optically looks a little bit weird for some of us to see because we're not used to that with USC in the modern era of college football in Lincoln Riley, but like that's where they're at right now. I know it's early. I know it's March, but hear me clearly, that matters. I'll tell you why it matters right now. Before we do that, make sure you're locked in. Make sure you are subscribed to the On3 YouTube channel. College football year-round, recruiting, portal, games, all that. Make sure you're dialed in. We appreciate y'all, especially all USC fans that have subscribed for us here in the last couple of weeks. Here's how it stands right now. USC has 14 commits in the class. It's a pretty good number. 9 of those dudes are from California. 8 of those dudes are from Southern California. And 3 of those dudes are from the Trinity League, which, am I biased? A little bit, yeah, but I think it's the best high school league in all of America. So there's that. They just got a commitment from Trent Mosley, wide receiver, as a 4-star cat from Santa Margarita in the Trinity League. Yo, we've been saying it. This is what it takes. This is what it takes for USC. If you want to compete at the highest level, it starts at home. And we had Lincoln Riley on the show. He echoed that sentiment. If you win in Southern California, you have enough talent to go compete for national championships. It's one of the benefits of being a school in Southern California. Not everywhere is like this. Like Oregon, they crush it, but they got to go to Texas. They got to go to California. They got to go to Georgia. USC, you got to drive down 55. You got to drive down the 405, and you're in a hotbed where a ton of talent. If you lock it down, you're able to win at the highest level. And so the thing for USC now, it's encouraging, I think, for USC fans because it feels like now you're actually taking recruiting to a different level of serious. Not saying they weren't taking it serious before, but it feels like there is a different level of intentionality in place. And the reason why I think that's happening is you got your new GM, Chad Bowden, who you took from Notre Dame. And I don't think it's a coincidence you grab him and then now you're the number one class in 2026. Long way to go. We'll talk about that. But I think that's probably the key cog I would point to. I would also say when you talk about the overall mentality around recruiting right now for USC, they're talking their cash a little bit, sort of between the lines if you're watching everything on social media. But USC is talking that smack. Like I just mentioned, the receiver commitment they got from Santa Margarita and Trent Mosley. They were battling with A1 Notre Dame for his services. And when they got that commitment, it just so happened that the USC Twitter page also put out a video of Mike Williams, former USC wide receiver, speaking into the camera saying the best receivers come to USC. And they were playing highlight after highlight of USC wide receivers against Notre Dame. It's very subtle, sort of a subtweet of sorts, but like USC is talking their smack. When do you talk your smack? When you know you can back it up. USC right now knows they can back it up. They are backing it up, and they're having that kind of, I think, extra confidence on the recruiting trail, which to me, if I'm a USC fan, fires me up. Now, the first thing you'll hear, and this is everywhere in recruiting, so just bear with me here. The first thing you always hear from the Twitter bots is, well, it's all about money. Well, they just bought their class. If they are, dude, good. I'd be concerned if they weren't buying their class. And wasn't that always kind of the thing for USC? Wasn't that always the advantage? If you're telling me that the school in one of the most major cities in America, in Los Angeles, is going to have a chance to pay players, you better have a top class. You better be competing in that tier. Got alumni like Will Ferrell and George Lucas. Yeah, you better go to work, dude. You got LeBron down the street. I don't know if that matters at all in the NIL front, but I don't think it hurts the recruiting front to be able to take guys to a Lakers game. I'm just saying, I think overall USC is now operating at a different tier. And if NIL is a part of that, that's how it should be. So a lot of people now, one more pushback will be, yeah, but they're not going to finish at number one. Y'all, I don't care if they don't finish number one. If USC doesn't finish number one, I'm not worried about it. It's not about that for USC. It's about finishing in that tier with folks you expect to compete with. Like USC, if they could finish top 10, that's a win for this class, 1,000%. Not saying they can't still finish number one, but if they can be in that tier, that's where USC needs to be at to go start competing at the level they want to compete at on the field. So to close here, it's all teed up. We said it last time, USC is now teed up on the recruiting trail to catch the wave that could come from the on-field product. Number one class, number of commits. Will some guys decommit? I mean, that's kind of the way college football seems to work, I'm sure. But overall, the intentionality, the process, the confidence, seemingly the resources, all those things are lined up to where USC is once again a force to be reckoned with on the recruiting trail, and I'm excited to see how it plays out. So appreciate y'all that have been dialed in for the entirety of this show. Be a friend. Subscribe to the show. Subscribe to the channel. Hey, usually we do a playoff field for you here on these Thursday shows. We're going to keep doing that here going forward, but the playoff field this week will be on podcast platform, The Huddle, which drops Friday, Saturday, depending on when we put that out. So if you want to get the playoff field, got to go to the podcast feed. So for Cato on the ones and twos, for myself, JD Piquel, we appreciate y'all. We love y'all. Enjoy spring practice. We're going to keep this party rolling, and we will see y'all